Chapter 13. The Consulate. The sun had not yet risen when the morning call to prayer aroused me. By the faint pink glow of dawn, I dressed and checked that the signal paper was safely in my pocket before turning to wake Jacques. Approaching the bed, I nearly crashed to the floor as my foot slipped on something round, my arms windmilling madly as I struggled to regain my footing. A half-dozen empty bottles of bucha lay strewn about the floor. Recalling Jacques' drunken fury when we'd first met, I slipped his knife from his sheath before attempting to rouse him. "Jacques," I said as I shook his shoulder. "Wake up, it's time to go." There was no response, so I shook harder, raising my voice until I was shouting in his ear. Still, he did not stir. For a moment I feared he was dead, but cocking my ear to his mouth I heard the faint rattle of breath. I had often found father like this, and knew that nothing would rouse him. He would wake only in his own time. So I waited, fidgeting impatiently at the foot of the bed as the sky continued to pale. Already we had lost the cover of darkness, and without our Arab disguises, every minute that ticked by made our capture ever more likely. I thought of the captain bound and beaten in Barr's torture cell, holding out hour after hour for a rescue that would never come. Soon I could stand it no longer. In desperation I brandished Jacques' knife and stabbed it into his flank. He let out an animal groan, his body lurching and heaving, his eyes sprang open and lolled about in their sockets. "I'm sorry," I said as I sprang back. "I had to. I didn't know if you'd... Well, it's time to go." But even as I spoke, the eyes drooped shut and his spasms abated, and with a sound like a deflating bag, he sank back into the mattress and the room was quiet once more. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen with indecision, but next I knew I was scrambling for the door, nearly tripping again over the empty bottles. One of them skittered across the floor, landing at the feet of a caretaker standing outside. He eyed me strangely as I flew past him and down the stairs. Down crowded streets I ran, keeping to the shadows as I scurried along. I had run only a few blocks when I stopped for breath, and in that moment the fog of panic lifted and I realized I was lost. Glancing about, I found no landmarks to fix my bearings. In all directions the alleys looked alike, and I no more knew where I was headed than from where I had come. Jacques had kept his plans to himself, feeding me only those scant details he deemed essential. I did not even know how he planned to interrogate the consul, or enter the citadel, or even how to find the radio once inside. I had only a single address, quite useless to me now, 200 Avenue d'Africa. Suddenly I became aware of the dozens of prying eyes bearing down on me from every window and balcony and hastily retreated to a nearby alley. Mercifully my panic soon subsided and my wits returned. Jacques was right. The time had come when he was not there to save me, and my thoughts turned to what he would do in my place. Certainly not sit around like some frightened child. When the Richelieu was captured, did he resign himself to captivity? And when our card game scheme was exposed, did he hesitate to shoot those men and save us both? No, at every turn he leapt right into the fray, running circles around his foes like a buzzing housefly, never standing still long enough for them to catch him. If I was to survive in this dangerous world, I would have to do the same. Tally-ho, and damn the consequences. So I rose from my hiding place and carried on down the alley, trusting that with guile and a little luck I would complete my mission and be back at the inn by the time Jacques awoke. Then, together, we would launch our assault on the citadel. Rounding the corner I froze as I spotted a soldier standing guard across the square. As I paused to plot my route around him, I remembered something Jacques had told me 2 days before, which had been rattling around in my head ever since. The less others know about you, the more power you have. Glancing across the square at the soldier, a strange realization came to me. I was in no danger at all. After all, what sentinel would expect the fugitive he was seeking to blunder right up to him? Suddenly, without fear, I rose and strode across the square. "Excuse me," I said to the soldier in English. "What do you want?" he said gruffly in Spanish. Can you help me? I'm lost. Ayuda? Soy perdido?" The soldier's hand flew to his breast pocket. "Oh no, I'm not falling for that," he said. "Get out of here, you little rat." Por favor," I pleaded, with all the innocence I could muster. "Soy perdido. Mi padre está buscado." But I was answered only by jabs from the soldier's bayonet. With my scheme foundering before my eyes, I quickly changed tactics. Burying my head in my hands, I began to weep. Through my fingers, I saw the soldier hesitate and lower his rifle. It was working. "Where do you live, boy?" he said warily. I lowered my hands, revealing a truly pathetic face, red, tear-stained, snot-nosed. "El Consulado," I sobbed. "El Consulado Británico." A sudden look of realization flashed across the soldier's face. "What is your name, boy?" he said. Colin, I said. Colin Sutherland. That was when I saw it. The sudden glint of gold in his eyes. I could almost hear the cogs whirring in his head as he glanced furtively from side to side, doubtless wondering whether to turn me in to his superiors or claim the reward for himself. It was not until I saw that faint smirk playing on his lips that I knew I had him. Jacques was right. What lazy, greedy creatures these Spaniards were. Come, this way, he said, shouldering his rifle. Let's get you to your father. Not 5 minutes' walk down the road, the Consulate stood like a glittering jewel amid the rough shops and tenements. A mirage of lime-washed domes, arches, columns, and intricate stone screens that shone blindingly in the morning sun. Flanking the gate, 2 native soldiers in white uniforms and red tasseled hats stood guard beneath a Union Jack, flapping proudly in the breeze. Get the consul, said the soldier as he dragged me by the arm to the gate. I found his son. At the sight of me, the guard started and gaped in astonishment. One sprang to his guard box and lifted the telephone. After a short, frantic exchange, he emerged and beckoned to me. Not you, said the other guard, shoving the soldier back. The Spaniard looked on in dismay as the gate was shut between us, and I was whisked away into the consulate. Past the gate, I was greeted with scenes of beauty I had not seen in my wildest dreams. Soaring marble colonnades crossed with beams of golden sunlight, cool oases of burbling fountains and manicured palms, and mosaic walls so intricate they hardly seemed the work of mortal men. But my reverie was short-lived, for the tranquil air was shattered by the frantic patter of footsteps echoing down the hall. A moment later, a man came careening around the corner in a whirlwind of flapping coat-tails. Colin? Colin? Oh, my boy, he cried as he sprinted towards me. With his fiery copper hair and wild green eyes, he reminded me of Mr. McGowan, though looking more the part of the diplomat with his neatly trimmed whiskers, crisp suit, and mirror-shined shoes. As he clapped his hands on my shoulders, I could feel his whole body convulsing in great heaving spasms. I was worried sick, he sobbed in a thick Scotch brogue. Had everyone looking high and low for you? Where in God's name have you— His voice cut out, quick as if his throat had been cut. His eyes grew wide, then narrowed to murderous slits. Before I could break free, his hands closed around my arms like vices. Who the hell are you, little bastard? He roared, shaking me savagely like a snake he'd found in his bed. How the hell did you get in here? I stammered, reeling with pain as his hands seemed to crush my bones. What are you doing dressed as my son? Answer me, you little— Suddenly he stopped as another man appeared in the corridor. Thin, with a gaunt face and large, searching eyes, he held an open notebook in his hand as he surveyed the scene with alarm. Still shaking, Mr. Sutherland released me and slowly rose to his feet. I'm sorry you had to see that, Mr. Dupont, he said, vexedly adjusting his tie. Was there anything else I could do for you? I'm sorry I can't be of more help. No, you have been most helpful, said Dupont, tipping his head sympathetically. I'll let you know if I need anything else, and I do hope your son is returned to you soon. With that, he slipped his notebook into his jacket pocket and strode off down the corridor. Mr. Sutherland turned to the guard, still standing at the corner. Who brought him here? He said. A Guardia officer, said the guard. Another of Spain's finest, Mr. Sutherland spat. You go tell him never to come back here again, you understand, or I'll be having words with that Captain Barra of his. The guard gave a curt nod and marched off down the corridor. I could not help but grin. Everything was going according to plan. The soldier, loath to admit he had been fooled by a mere child, was unlikely to report our encounter to his superiors. I had nothing more to fear from him. And just as I'd hoped, I now stood alone with Mr. Sutherland. Though more choleric than I'd imagined a consul to be, I was undeterred. After all, I had much experience with such men. Far more worrying was this thick Scotch brogue, which his son likely shared, and which I would have to master if I was to fool Captain Barra. So, said Sutherland, still scowling, care to explain yourself? Here to nick the silverware, I shouldn't wonder. No, sir, I said. I'm a friend of Colin's. Are you now? Said Sutherland. What's your name? Remembering Jacques' maxim on lying, I simply replied, Edward. Edward who? Edward Hawkins. Mercifully, not a glint of recognition appeared on his face. Never heard him talk about any Edward Hawkins, he said. He brings his mates round here all the time, and I've never seen you. Well, no, I said, you see, sir, under Sutherland's withering glare I nearly wilted, gaping helplessly as I fumbled for an answer. Then I noticed the tears still wet on his cheeks, and realized this was no George Hawkins or Jacques Moineau. Just a distraught father trying his best to hold himself together. Had my silence lasted a second longer, I would have been sunk, but at the last moment I managed to blurt out an answer. My father wouldn't allow it, I said. He doesn't like me coming to this side of town, you see. But Sutherland's expression did not soften. Tell me, Edward Hawkins, he said tersely, what's the idea coming here saying that you're my Colin? I'm sorry, sir, I said. I didn't mean to, truly. I didn't know how to get here, you see, so I asked that Guardia officer to show me. He must have mistaken me for Colin. Damned Dagos, he scoffed, shaking his head. The bastards will sell their own children for a bit of drink and money. I breathed a sigh of relief. Despite a fraught start, I had allayed his suspicions, for the moment at least. I could at last get to work. Now what do you want? Said Sutherland. I've got business to attend to. I came to see about Colin, I said. For weeks now, when me and the other boys get together to play, he hasn't shown up, and I just heard a rumor he'd been kidnapped. Is it true, sir? At this, Sutherland clenched his jaws, if struck by some great pain, and on quaking legs stumbled backwards and collapsed onto a nearby chair. There he sat for several minutes, head in hands, body heaving as he fought back tears. Aye, he said, looking up at me with tear-stained eyes. It's been near 3 weeks now. Vanished, without a trace, no ransom note or anything. The Guardia and the army has been searching high and low, even the French, but they've not found anything. They all say it's no use, that he's... Unable to speak those dreaded words, he buried his face back in his hands. Is there anything I can do to help? I offered. I came just as soon as I heard. Thanks, lad, said Sutherland, wiping his eyes. But there's nothing anyone can do now, except pray, unless you happen to know where he might be. No, sorry, sir, I said. But I do know where I last saw him. Sutherland's head perked up. Aye, that's something, he said, a note of hope in his voice. Where? At Madame Fatima's, I said, unable to think of anything else. Madame Fatima! Sutherland exclaimed, suddenly enraged. Yes, you know her? Aye, said Sutherland. Everyone in town knows about that woman. What the hell were you and Colin doing with the likes of her? Under his accusing glare, I leaned once more upon the truth. He was helping me, I mumbled, dropping my eyes to the floor, to cheat at cards. When the players say he'd pay us 5 pesetas each. What? Sutherland roared, leaping to his feet. So you're the little bastard getting my son mixed up with your little schemes, getting him into trouble. It's 'cause of you he's missing, I shouldn't wonder. Christ, I knew I shouldn't have brought him out here to the stinking den of thieves. I remained silent through this tirade, astonished by the ease with which these brazen lies had slipped from my mouth, and how well they were working. Father and Jacques would have seen right through them, but Sutherland was lapping up every word. I'm sorry, I said. I tried to stop him, but he insisted. I didn't mean to get him in trouble. Aye, insistent is the word, Sutherland grunted, pacing back and forth across the hall. And foolish, his head full of nonsense about joining the Navy. Trying to get himself money to bribe himself aboard a ship, I shouldn't wonder. You wanted to join the Navy, I said. Sutherland halted his pacing. Aye, he said, eyeing me strangely. Hardly spoke about anything else. He never mentioned that to you? Yes, a few times, I said hastily. Didn't think much of it. You have to be 18 to join. If only, said Sutherland grimly. They take on lads as young as 14 as boy seamen. They do? I said, my interest suddenly piqued. Aye, said Sutherland, and those recruiters will turn a blind eye if you're a few years younger, especially if you slip them a few pounds. You'd better believe he knew it. Striding off down the corridor, Sutherland led me to a small room lined with shelf upon shelf of ships and bottles. There were hundreds of them, of every type imaginable, from racing schooners to Napoleonic ships of the line to dreadnoughts. On a workbench the latest project lay half-finished, abandoned amid a clutter of tools and wooden scraps. He loved doing this, said Sutherland wistfully. Every night, no matter how busy I got, he'd insist on working at least an hour in here. I slowly wandered around the room, enraptured by this magnificent collection, by the impossible delicacy of each ship perfectly rendered in exacting detail. It was some time before I regained my senses and remembered my mission. What's this one? I asked, pointing to the half-finished model on the table. Oh, that'd be HMS Victory, said Sutherland. His favourite. He must have built at least a dozen of that one. Even had a wee one to carry around in his pocket, never went anywhere without it. There was a long silence as Sutherland's face creased with anguish. Never thought much about it, he croaked. He was always going on about wanting to be a midshipman or powder monkey under Lord Nelson. Laddish fantasies, I thought. Now he's gone and done it, hasn't he? He's... You know, I wish he'd been kidnapped. Then there'd be a chance. I'd have paid anything they'd asked. I had come to the Consulate with a single goal, to gather information on Colin Sutherland. But on seeing this man, this imposing and upright representative of empire, reduced to a sobbing wreck at the loss of his boy, I was moved to sympathy, and I wondered, had father ever wept for me? Actually, sir, I said, I don't think he did. Get aboard a ship, I mean. What? Said Sutherland. I heard some men talking at Madame Fatima's. They said he'd been captured by Rasouli. Rasouli? Said Sutherland. Are you sure? Yes, I said. One of them was El Crim's man, and he said they didn't have him. I knew it, said Sutherland, storming from the room. That Madame Fatima's gotten away with her den of vice and traitors long enough. Time to finally put an end to it. No, I cried, chasing after him. She had nothing to do with it. She didn't even know until me and the other lads told her. Aye, she'd want you to think that, wouldn't she, said Sutherland. But she's into every other crooked business in this shite-hole. Don't think she's above kidnapping and ransoming. As he continued to march away, I ran up and tugged at his sleeve, stopping him in his tracks. Please believe me, sir, I pleaded. She's been ever so nice to Colin and me. Yes, I'm sure she has, Sutherland spat. Probably made a pretty penny off you, too. Now she's found a way to get even more off my Colin. No, she saved our skins loads of times. Please believe me, we'd be dead if it wasn't for her. Sutherland glared at me, his finely groomed moustache quivering with barely contained rage. But after a few moments, the fire seemed to die out, and he let out a quiet sigh. What else did you hear? He said. Tell me everything. That's all of it, I'm afraid, I said. Then, seeing the opportunity to take my leave, I added, But I can find out. I'm sure if Madame Fatima knows something, she knows lots of things. At that moment, a servant appeared and approached Sutherland. Your Excellency, he said, there is a telephone call for you, from London. Right, thank you, said Sutherland. I must get going, he said to me. Business to take care of. But you find out all you can and you come right back here, understand? I nodded. Thanks, lad, said Sutherland, managing a weak smile before striding off down the corridor. As soon as he was gone from view, I ducked into the model room and slipped one of the bottles of HMS Victory into my jacket pocket. Minutes later, I was striding through the Consulate gate and out into the streets of Hueta. My mission had been a triumph. Armed with nothing but my wits, a thin disguise, and some carefully chosen half-truths, I bluffed my way into a heavily guarded compound and emerged with all the intelligence I needed. The citadel, with its massive stone walls and garrison of armed guards, no longer seemed so impenetrable. Head held high, I wended my way back to the inn, practicing my Scotch brogue as I went. My name's Colin Sutherland. I'm 9 years old. You know where my father is? I miss him. He's the British consul. We live in the palace on Africa Avenue. On reaching the inn, I bounded up the stairs, anxious to tell Jacques of my brilliant coup. How proud he would be, I thought, that after a mere 2 days' apprenticeship I had nearly become his equal, a wily and dependable partner in crime. But the room was empty. The bottles were cleared away, the bedclothes laundered and folded. Thinking Jacques had gone downstairs, I returned to the café, but he was nowhere to be found. Puzzled, I stopped a passing waiter. Excuse me, I said, have you seen the Frenchman staying upstairs? Big man, black hair. Oh, yes, said the waiter. He left maybe an hour ago. Oh, thank you, I said as the waiter departed. Where could he have gone? A faint, terrible thought flickered in my mind, but I quickly banished it. After all, I had left without leaving so much as a note. Perhaps figuring I had abandoned him, he had set off on his mission alone. But how to find him? He must have had 1,000 haunts and bolt holes scattered throughout the city. I didn't know where to even begin. But I did know someone who might.